We are recording all of our sessions so that if anyone wants to watch it at a different time, we realize people have really busy schedules, and so right now may not be the best time for them, or they've got other meetings going on. So my name is Jessica Castaneda. I work as the IDRC director, work with a lot of good people. So it's really been a real pleasure to be able to work on the IDNR aspect. I'm just wanted to say hi, and then I'm going to get rid of my face because I don't like to watch it the whole time. So at least you know who I am, and then I can hide it. So this session, we really want, like I said, we really want to encourage you to use the chat box. And so if you've got something you want to add or questions you want to ask, the purpose of these trainings really was to take a look at some of those things that we all need for IDNR that would be helpful, kind of looking towards the summer, realizing we're still in a pandemic, realizing that we have lots of challenges. There are just some good foundational things that we can do. And so all of the sessions that we have for the Summer Recruitment Institute, we tried to look at what could be helpful for any program, and then what might be helpful later on as someone onboards a new recruiter to have some of the big picture trainings available. And so that's kind of the purpose in what we're doing. And it looks like we've had good attendance so far. So I congratulate you all in figuring out the system, navigating, and we didn't just send Zoom links this time. It was a little bit more more complicated, but that was the way that we could accommodate a lot of people. So this particular session, we were really looking from the mindset of, I think on the next slide, I have the session description. The idea is we all have a lot of things that we have to organize. And sometimes we may feel like we have a lot of resources and we know exactly how to support our recruiters, or recruiters ourselves. We may feel like we've got the support we need. We know what we're supposed to be doing. But a lot of times it's not exactly so cut and dry. You're not sure always where to send your recruiters. You're not exactly sure if you're new, where you even figure out, the places and the points that they should be visiting, or maybe IDRC states just got a ton of data that we gave to everybody. Maybe they're trying to figure out how to navigate it and what they should be doing. So this session is really going to walk you through the thought process of if you're organizing an area as a recruiter, if you're organizing, if you're a supervisor, and how do you really take your particular situation and really optimize the tools and resources that you have. So my background, I worked for about 17 years as one of the project coordinators for Tennessee's migrant education program. And that involved everything from starting out and not knowing, I was the IDNR coordinator, but we didn't have hardly any recruiters. So having to figure out what on earth it means to recruit. I also was a statewide recruiter. Over time, we were the most underfunded program in the nation for a long time, really the whole time I was there. So we always had this constant challenge of trying to make sure that we were doing a good job, never having enough resources to do it, really wanted to do right by the families and really wanting to support our staff, but being absolutely required to figure out how to streamline. So the things that I'm going to share, a lot of it will come from experience and from things that I've seen that have worked. And then other things are observations that as we work with different states, really learned how they were able to do things. We're hoping to be able to share that in this session. So starting out, you have this idea of organizing IDNR. We have our needs assessment, we have our service delivery plan, we have all of these things that we might look at program-wise as far as services, but then there's this wide open area of IDNR. So we think, okay, we hire recruiters and then we send recruiters out. Well, there's ways that we can support. And so on this first side, it says, in the ideal world, we've got them covering areas that they know where they're supposed to be, they know what they should be focused on, and they really can maximize their time and efforts with their schedules, with everything that they're doing. And then there's the other side, where the recruiters are working, but they're not really sure if they're working on the right thing. They don't have a ton of support. Maybe they are not sure if exactly where they should go, and they're just trying to begin the process of canvassing. So, or we may fall somewhere in the middle. And so it's really looking at this idea of, if we are on this side that we're missing the target, what are some things that we can do? And if we're on the other side, is there anything that we can do better? So I'm a huge believer that good IDNR is based on good data. Like I very much am interested in what's happening agriculture-wise across the country. And that is very much based on my own experience of in Tennessee, having half the state that I knew nothing about, and suddenly we were supposed to go find migrant families. And you're thinking, there's got to be something that helps me know where to find them or what agriculture places there are, or where on earth I can't just drive around and look for license plates. Like, what can I do? So this foundation has to be very much on data. So the data is things like farm lists, agribusiness locations, H2A and H2B job sites and housing locations, labor contractor lists. Some states out west have, some places have a lot more labor contractors. Other places, it's very much farm owner who's you would talk to. But if your state does have labor contractors, there's places that you can go to get that information. Then there's new crops, the things that come up like hemp, and you say, hey, I know hemp is out there, but I have no idea what's happening in our state. Finding out ways that you can get that information. USDA keeps a really good list of their meat inspection sites. And so they update that and they put that out there pretty much quarterly. And so not every USDA meat inspection site qualifies for us. Some of them are past the initial commercial processing, but a lot of them do qualify. So you have to kind of sort through that and figure out which ones are in your area. I'm a big fan of using old addresses. So if I had a bunch of places and we were an MIS 2000 state, and so I used to keep a report specifically to look at the places that were old addresses where people have moved away, but where did they live? And so our recruiters would go out, and part of their job would be visit these places, and included in that would be the old addresses. So I know the housing. If I've got a brand new recruiter, I can give them that and say, hey, they used to be here. Would you start with this and let us know? Is there a process in your state to organize and update your current state data? Or do you do this like, every 2 years? What is your process? What does it look like? So I noticed that somebody raised your hand. If you want to put your question in the chat box, I'll definitely try to address that right away. Then there's also the idea of documentation. How do I keep track of, the sound is really broken. Let me see. Is anybody else running into that? Let me see, make sure that it's not. Okay. All right. If everyone else is hearing, then it may be, okay, maybe somebody's just there on their end. Okay. Thank you for that quick response. So if you can't hear, I think it's got to be something internally, because it looks like everybody else is hearing. I'm not sure. So then there's going back to kind of what we're talking about, this documentation process of how are you keeping track of where you're visiting? And then are you actually, if you're on the state level, are you able to ensure that your entire state is being thoroughly targeted? And this is something I see over and over and over with states, is people will say, well, it's just we don't have a program there and we don't have a lot of resources, so we're not really even covering that area. So of course, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be canvassing as much as we can. So is there a process in place to ensure that the entire state is thoroughly targeted? So hopefully you're not sitting here going, this is not possible, because I know from my own personal experience that it is a complete challenge, and you are building. So you build from where you are. So if you're not anywhere near this, that's fine. You go farther, you try to take a little bit more. So here's some questions that I have for you. And maybe if you want to put some answers in the chat box, just so we can kind of see what you don't have to answer all of them, but if you want to put a comment about any of these things that you're seeing, do you know any of these things? Do you see areas of your state that are losing farms and agribusiness? So is there a particular crop, or dairy, for example, is one of those things that across the country is really struggling? Is anyone seeing something that is really decreasing in their state? Then on the opposite side, what areas are growing? We know that hemp, for example, is growing in a lot of places. And then in your own estimation, you don't have to answer it out to the group or anything. If you had to say for your area, do you have any idea of how many acres of a particular crop is growing in your area? Let's say you're in Washington State and you've got apples and cherries. Are you pretty familiar with the size and scope of the crops that you're looking at, and whether they're increasing or decreasing from years to years? Do you know how many estimated farm workers are in each county in your state? There is actual data that we'll look at today that tells you that gives you what farmers are saying are specifically according to their reports of what they're having. So one of the comments is, yeah, we're losing our tobacco farms. I live in Tennessee, and we definitely are. That was something that when I was still working, we saw this transition out of tobacco into other things. What crops does your state produce the most of, and how does it rank to other counties or states? So these are all things that exist. There is data to help you with this, but are you aware? Are you aware of all eligible qualifying crops and businesses in your state? I know when I first started, I had absolutely no idea what crops would qualify and what didn't, or where they were located at. I'd never seen a tobacco field. So there's a comment that says, grape vineyards for tourism have exploded in our area, some impacts due to COVID. So you may have suddenly this new agriculture area that you didn't have before. So the question is, if each one of us should be able to know these basic questions. Are we losing? Are we losing farms? Are we gaining? What kind of crops do we have? How many farm workers usually come? How does our county compare to other counties in the state? And are we really aware of all the different types of things in our area? So this is a good place to start with, and we'll talk about how we can get some of these things. So there are sources that everyone can get, and so we'll kind of talk about some of these. One of them, we do have H2A and H2B workers so H2B usually sometimes are non-ag. It could be like hotel workers or recreational type, like skiing, things like that. But it also can be fishing, and sometimes it's in forestry. So one of our challenges is that H2A growers are, there more farms across the country are using H2A now than they ever have. And some places like in the South and on the West Coast and certain, California, Washington, Oregon, some of those states, they're seeing a huge increase. Some states like Nebraska, Iowa, those kind of states are not yet seeing a huge increase, but depending on where you are, this may be something that you're seeing really grow and you're not sure where to get that information from. So IDRC does have, let me see if I can share. Let's see if I can share a different, share it on the website here. Give me just a second. I need to type it in. One thing most of you are probably familiar with this, but some of you may not be. So I just want to make sure that you see where to go. On the IDRC website, we are going to pretty much from here on out, as long as we can, we have new lists for everybody on their H2A maps. This is something that'll be available for everybody. We were just doing it for our states, and then we figured it would be way better to just do it for all states. So when you go to this, and I'll put it in the chat box if you haven't seen it before. Let me see if I can do two things at once. Probably not, but let me put this in. In the chat box is the link directly for this. So these maps will update. I think we updated last time is in March. You have in here, you have a state map, a state listing that you can just click on here, and the Excel listing will come down. There is a batch geo map that's associated with that looks similar to this map up here at the top. And then there's a housing file that lists the housing locations. And then there also is a map that lists just the housing. And so you can actually go in and see this particular one is for Arizona. You can go in here and click on these little icons and be able to kind of see where these guys are living and be able to contact, those farms. So we are including this. It says we don't have North Carolina listed. We should. It's down here towards the bottom. So H2A, if you're not familiar with this, is those that come specifically for an agriculture visa. And the link is shared right above. Just kind of click up above it. The link is on there. This is specifically those that are coming for visas for short term. It could be anywhere between 6 to 9 to 11 or even more months specifically to work in agriculture. And so this information is, we pull it from several places, but there is a tool called Spotlight that a lot of people are familiar with, that we are absolutely grateful that it exists. I can go in here and see all of the farms that are in a particular area and click on them, and it'll say, okay, John B. I know it's tiny, but it's John B. Martin wants 41 H2A workers. I can click on here. And then I can actually see the order for those workers. So this is the form that a farm owner would have to be able to provide Department of Labor to request workers. He's agreeing to provide housing and a certain amount of salary for a certain amount of time, and has to get permission to get visas for these workers to come from different places. And so you can see one of the things that's included in here is the place that they're going to be working and also the place that they live. And so going back, we'll have this tool. If you want to find Spotlight down here and get the extra information, do you need a login to access the map? Yes, good question. All maps that are on the website specifically the password is IDRC. So that is definitely a good question to ask. So just go to the website. You can see that. If you click on any of the little map icons, it will ask you specifically for that password. Okay, so let me make sure I go back to where we were. So that is one way that this is just one little point of data that we're trying to make sure is available for everybody statewide. And so you can kind of see. So, okay, so Myra also put on here, that's a good quote, good point too. The Department of Labor has, specifically here is information about what H-2A is. And so what Myra just shared, is a great example of, some resources that are available for H-2A. So if you're not familiar with what H-2A, this specifically mentions that. Very good, thank you. Can you put the website in the chat? So Myra's has that Department of Labor right there. Could you please put the link in the chat for everyone? Okay, the website, let me see. We did put the website up here. If you guys will just watch the chat box here a little bit higher up, we did put the website right away. So we'll go ahead and put that. You know what? I'm telling you that we did. I sent it to the panelists. Never mind. There you go. Now you should see it. Sorry, I'm thinking, man, it's right there. I apologize. So you can click on there and see that. Again, that's the link for this right here, for this website. So I'll have to make sure I give it to all of you instead of just the panelists, which is just myself. So I apologize. Okay. Now let's go back to where we were. Let me see. Make sure I'm sharing the right thing. All right, let's make sure that you can see the slides and then we'll go from there. And thank you guys for any of you that have comments or want to share it share any of those extra resources, please do. Okay, so then how many of you have used the Ag Census before? And if you've used the Ag Census, if you would in the box, explain maybe how you've used it, if anybody wants to share that. So who has used the Ag Census in the past? No, if nobody's used it, that's okay. But just wanted to see if anybody out there has studied this before. Okay, I don't see any comments that anybody has, so I'll just kind of go from the background to kind of explain a little bit about it. So the Ag Census has a ton of summary data. It's one of the best, I think, summary data that's out there. So Michael Hay says, I've used it to find concentrations of crops. That's a perfect example of what you could use it for. So the Ag Census has a lot of summary data for each county and a lot of information on kind of how you rank, how that particular county ranks against another county. Comes out every 5 years, which some people say, well, it's 5 years ago, so it may not be, the last one was in 2017. It may not be that accurate. It's pretty accurate, it shows, but you can do some comparisons between 2012 and 2017. There'll be increases and decreases of some things, but it's a good place to start. When I was working in Tennessee, this was the foundation of what I used to be able to figure out if a county was really a priority area that I would find more families, or I could take a look at the farm demographics of one county and know that I had a certain number of migrant kids and assume that if I had similar demographics of, for example, how many acres of a particular crop that seemed to need a certain amount of workers, I could look and see, well, what other counties in the state are similar to this? And it would give me, I had the challenge of all 95 counties figuring out which ones we really needed to focus on and which ones we didn't. And the Ag Census was, for me, was just absolutely super, super helpful. There's also a lot of maps and resources that are available based on the Ag Census. It will include that county rankings on crops. It will give you the number of workers in each county. Again, this is based on farmer surveys. So you can give and take, like the migrant side, it'll say how many migrant workers do you have? That's their interpretation of what a migrant worker is. So it may not be exactly ours. But if you're seeing numbers of that, then you can probably be sure that these are people that are coming and going. It'll also let you know the exact acreage of specific types of crops. And it will give you comparisons that you can take a look at your old census compared to the new one and see kind of what's happening in that particular. So I think I have a slide here. Let me kind of take you there, and I will go ahead and put this in the box and hopefully get it out to you guys so you can actually see it. So right here, if you can go to the Ag Census, this is, I'm just going to kind of give you a walkthrough of some of the things that it has in the Ag Census and how you can possibly use it. So there is these huge amounts that you can say that there is there's an aquaculture census. So if you're a fishing state and you're wondering, that that exists also. You can say here, I want to choose on the side. You can figure out if you want to see the census. All these records from years and years ago are available. We're just going to keep looking at 2017. So it says, okay, you want to look at 2017. You can look at, there's different ways that you can look at it. I like to go to the state and county data. So I'm just gonna, whoever puts it in the box first will look at your state. So somebody give me what state you want. We'll take a look at that particular state. Okay, first one in was Colorado. So you can click on here. So if I went too fast, there's the map. You can click on the state itself over here, and then it'll share what kind of information is available. So there is the state report. So there is a complete huge report that's right here that's available in the PDF. And then there's things that are broken down, like you want to see the number of hogs and pigs and the number of vegetables and potatoes. You can kind of see, but there's an easier way to use it because most of you will not want to have 500 pages of bedtime reading about your state. But if you go back and you take a look at what's called the county things, let me see, county level data. Let me see if I'm giving you the wrong thing. Hold on, I gotta find county rankings. Let's see, county profiles. Okay, so you can see, even though you look at it a whole bunch, you may, there is over here on the side what are called highlights. So you can see also that there are other censuses that are available. There's the census of aquaculture. There is also the census of horticulture. So that's your nursery. So there's more information out there. So give me a place, a county in Colorado that you want to take a look at, or the county that you think is the largest ag. Okay, we got a Mesa. So open this up. These, I love these. They exist for every single county that's in the entire country. So what this does is give you your county profile. So it says, this is the number of farms that they've had. So in this particular Mesa County, here's the number they have. It's 9% up from 2012. The average size of farms is 139 acres, so not super huge, but that has decreased. So you have more farms, but they're smaller. Then it'll give you some information as far as the market value of products sold, government payments. So these are subsidies to farmers, farm-related income. Now, and you kind of look and say, okay, that's interesting. Some of this is not super helpful, but some of it is. So it'll tell you, okay, the shares by top, you're kind of half crops, half livestock and poultry in this particular county. Land in use, you've got cropland is 23%, pasture land is 60%, woodland 9%, and other. Irrigated, that 22% of your farms are irrigated. Usually when they're irrigated, there's workers that are tied to that irrigation in some type. Then it tells you like your land of use practices, no-till is 5%, reduced till, if that's relevant. Then it goes on to tell you how many farms you have of different sizes. So in this particular county, you have over 1,000 acres. And did I tell you what, let me do something. Did I give you guys, no, I didn't. I should have, well, I'll put the link in here in just a second so you can each look up your own areas. So then it'll tell you, okay, you've got 63 farms that are over 1,000 acres. So this could just be really big cattle farms that don't have very much, workers that are coming for that, or it could be, vegetable. You want to know who are these huge farms. And so these are small. You have a lot more, 10 to 49 acres, 1 to 9 acres. You have a bunch of small farms, but then you have some of these bigger ones. The second page is more of my favorite. Then it will actually tell you what crops you have. So if I was to I have to go to an area that I know nothing about. I'm going to start here. I'm going to start right with this particular summary data, and I'm going to look at it. Grains, oil seeds, dry peas, and dry beans probably is not going to bring any workers, but I can see, okay, they're 25th in the state for that. Absolutely no tobacco, absolutely no cotton. Vegetables, it's saying that it doesn't have a ton of data. They're saying it's 12th in overall, but it's not giving me the exact number or anything right here for this. But there are some, and it'll also give you your rank. Some of you will have counties that are the top rank in the US, like For example, there's a couple counties in New Mexico that have the largest amount of dairy production in that county. They're in the top 10. So they would show over here, this is top 10 in the nation, and you could take a look at how you're ranking. Then it says there's a whole bunch, and you can kind of take, it is number one, this county is number one in your state for fruits, tree nuts, and berries. So you know that if I am going to recruit in this area, I want to know, what are those fruits, tree nuts, and berries, what are they? They're 12th for nursery. They are 21 for Christmas trees, and then other crops and hay. They are number 3 in poultry and eggs. So there's going to be, I'm going to need to look up, figure out who that is. Number 14 in livestock, poultry, and products. And then you can kind of see how it breaks down. So it gives milks from cow. They're number 12 in the state. And then it'll go on a little bit below and tell you your producers. These are your growers. And it'll tell you also, it doesn't tell you on this, you have to actually go to the ag. It says, could you please demo another picking? We could pick, I will send you the link here in just a second. So we will, you can also see the internet access. You can see if they sell directly to consumers, how many percents of farms hire farm labor, and how many of them are family farms. So now that you're like, where is this from? Let me send you the link. This is the link for kind of to see everything. And then you'll have to go in and pick your state. So we did have a Maricopa County in Arizona request. So we'll take a look at that. We click on Arizona, we walk, and then we go down and see state and county profiles. And then I need to find Maricopa. So then I can click on here, same kind of thing. Real quick, I want you to take a look at what might be helpful here. Their crops are 39%. Livestock, poultry, and products are, 61%. I can see cropland is half is going to be crops. Irrigation, 38%. So this area is irrigating even more than the last one we were taking a look at in Colorado. I can look at the farms. There are 89, farms that are over 1,000 acres. Moving on, I can see they are number one in nursery, greenhouse, floriculture, and sod, number 1 in Christmas trees, number 1 in crops and hay, number 1 in livestock, number 1 in poultry, horses, ponies, aquaculture. So this is going to be a big area for, possible migrant families. Then you can take a look at, say, 35% of the farms hire farm labor, 93% are family farms. And then over here, it'll tell you, these are the top crops. Forage, so their biggest one is still hay, then cotton, then vegetables, then wheat and corn. And then same thing for livestock, it'll tell you a lot of cattle and calves, you can kind of see. And so this, to me, is a foundation of where you want to look at. And let's say you're a supervisor and you're thinking, I wonder how these 3 counties add up. Which one, why do we have really high numbers here and this one? And they'll say, well, there's just not anything going on. You can go ahead and look at where the information is. Now, every now and then there's anomalies. Like I was talking to a group yesterday about in Tennessee, there was an area that had this huge amount of cropland that was related to vegetables, but there was no workers we could find. There wasn't housing. It was a really rural area. It turned out it was next door to where we had all these bean sheds. And I actually reached out to the county extension agent and said, hey, what is this particular, why do we have such high acreage for this particular crop, but I don't see any workers? And they said, oh, they're all next, in the next county. We don't have housing. We ship all of those beans to the houses in Crossville. Well, I knew about those, but I had no idea where it was coming from. So there are, it's not the end all, but it does give you a ton of really good information. So you can kind of take a look and look for your particular area. That is something where you can come back and see. This is one of my all-time favorites. But one of the things that we did do for IDRC members, and we'll probably update this for our new states that we have, we actually went through and took the big, huge, massive file that they had and put it into a spreadsheet of what was relevant. So I just want to share, there you can see, and we also have a training. There's a whole in-depth training on how to use the Ag Census with a lot more than what I'm sharing right now. And I'll include this link here. So we do have it for these states that we had with IRC, and we can probably compile the other ones also. But I want to give you an example of what it looks like. If I can, it may take a little bit to download. So when that's available, I'll open it up. But one of the things we did was really try to see how we could make that information helpful for states, and when that's available, I'll share it with you. So let me share my slides here. Go back to the slides. Any questions on the Ag Census so far, on anything I've said? Okay, I'll look for the box here. So you can kind of see, so they also have here, there's also some Ag Atlas maps and some Ag Census web maps that are also very helpful. And so maybe I need to go back to that same page and share those with you, because that's a whole nother thing that I forgot to mention. So if you click on this same page, and let me share, make sure everybody's got it, you can kind of play around with some of these tools that they have. One more right here. So this is the Ag Census page again, but if you go down towards the bottom, you'll see these Ag Atlas maps. And so these will give you, if you want to take a look at the milk cow inventory in the country and see where these things are kind of located, and my mouse is being weird, and you can kind of see where your area is and say, okay, I live in this little area, I have no idea what, you can kind of see where the concentration, they have a bunch of these, like potatoes, you can take a look and see, you know, where, who's producing those. They have a bunch of these maps that you can kind of play around with and see kind of where your county is, whether they have any of these things. They don't have everything that I wish that they have. They have like vegetables. Well, here's, this one might be helpful. And you can kind of take a look. It doesn't give you a ton of data. You can't click on it and like see who that is or anything like that. That's just the concentration of where they're seeing those particular things. So that's where that is. And then they also have what they call these web maps, which you can kind of go in and see, which I'll send you a link here. And so that these are these web map. You can actually go in and say, I want to see, it'll let you ask, see what you want to see. Do you want to see vegetables and melons harvested? You can kind of click on and say, I want to see where these particular things, I want to see where asparagus, and you can take a look, you can zoom out and zoom in and click and see, and it'll give you a little bit more information of that particular area. It'll say, okay, Clayton, Iowa, and it'll give you a little bit of the information about that particular county. And so it'll let you kind of see some of these comparisons, you know, that you can kind of take a look at. And it all goes back to the kind of maps that you want to see. You want to see field crops, you want to see hay. There's also farm information. So pretty much a lot of the stuff that's available in the census, they have these Ag Census maps that you can play around and take a look at. Again, doesn't give you the name of the farms, but it does very much give you some of the highlights of what's happening. You happen to see a bunch of dairy workers in particular county, you want to check out how dairy compares in the other areas, you can take a look and look at that. You know, where are the number of milk cows? And this one will show where the change is. And so I know it's super tiny. These are good to kind of play with on your own computer. And it'll say, okay, this particular county and Texas has had, Archer, Texas has had a small decrease, while over in Chavez, New Mexico, they've had a significant increase. And so you can kind of see where things are moving. And so this will compare between 2012 and 2017. So again, something you can kind of play with. It kind of builds that arsenal of data that you have. It's one of those things that I like to take a look at when and then there is probably going to be your favorite, and I will send a link to this. This is a new thing that they have. So you can actually go in and this is called their quick stats, and they did not have this when I was really trying to learn all these things. So what they've done is create this query tool that you can go in. Okay, chat box, somebody give me a state. We'll see if Kentucky's the first one on there. Okay, so then you can go and you can click two different things, and you guys can do yours at the same time if you do it at the link. You can click on your state and county level data, and it will let you say, okay, I want to see, you got to pick what you want to look at. Do you want to look at your highlights? Do you want to look at farm income? What I like on this one is hired farm labor. It's really hard to find this one in other places. You can click on here and say, I want to see the hired farm labor. These are from farms saying, hey, this is the number of workers we hired. My husband and I have a farm, and every time the Ag Census comes out, we have to fill out a very in-depth survey form that really shows everything, how many cows we have, how much labor we've had come in. Any of that kind of stuff has to be filled out. Those results are what populates this. So then I can go in and say, okay, I want to look at state and county data. I want to look at Kentucky. So I click on Kentucky. All right, what county in Kentucky? Give me a place in Kentucky. I'll watch the box. Okay, we got Warren. So you go down and you can say, here is Warren. And then I have to, there's a little box or something that says update grid. So I update this. And it'll take a little bit. My computer may be kind of slow. And then it gives me the number. So it says they believe that there are 387 places that hire workers. They have 166 hired workers. Okay, these are places that have only one, places that have two. And then that below it'll say the number of workers. So it says there's at least 885 hired workers just for this particular county. And then you can see the numbers, you know, how many of them are just at one with one. You can see that here's the total number. So you can go in and see that. You can also go in and say, you know, I want to see kind of how this, just how much agriculture there is. This kind of shows the number of operations, which ones have failed, how many are sitting idle. There's a bunch of different stuff that you can kind of, you know, see the summaries of. It's just kind of an easy way to use the query to see what's happening. It'll also tell you how much acreage it has for all sorts of, like, okay, it's got only 2 acres of potatoes. It's got 2 acres of sweet potatoes and 27 acres operations for orchards. So there's a lot of information that you can get from this query tool. So I encourage you to kind of play around with this and see, and just kind of back your data up with, is it what you think? Do you have as many as you believe that you had? And so let me make sure I share my PowerPoint again. So those are just a few of the tools that I really, really like on the Ag Census, and I think it gives us a good base. So here's an example of what we did for the Excel sheet that I mentioned. We took the county and then we took all of these different categories. So on the IDRC website, we kind of put those in so I could look, and then we highlighted the top 10 of each state to say, okay, Bedford County had the highest number of contract labor farms. They had at least 700. Oh, I lost my, sorry, I pressed my, at least 700 workers in that particular area. So you can see that, you know, this gives you good, there's a lot of farm information, a lot of addresses and things like this, but this gives you the estimated numbers of workers, and these are the ways that you can find it. So it's kind of a cool, I mean, I think, and I really, really like to use this tool. So again, this is where you can find it. On the slides, we have direct links to it. And then, okay, so moving on to a different area. One of the things, if you're thinking, okay, well, now I know that, you know, Bedford County is supposed to have 700 workers. How on earth am I supposed to find them? One of the easiest ways is just use Google. Start out with Google and kind of see what they have, what's showing up. It's not going to have everything, but it will have some good information. It's a good place to start. They've got a lot of listings. One of my all-time favorites is manta.com. It's a great business directory. We recently just asked all of our IDRC states to give us their farm data that we had, because we were looking on creating a mapping tool and a tool that would help identify farms. And we realized it's kind of 2 different things. And when we got states information, we could see that we were all over the place. Some states had very little information. Some states were super comprehensive. So we kind of added as a project on our side that we would get farm lists for everybody, all of our states. And one of the things that one of the places we went to was Manta. And so we actually scraped and copied and got as much data as we possibly could for all 26 states, so that everybody has a good base of information. They've got, you know, all of their basic farm listings. They've got all their labor contractors. They've got all their USDA information. So everything that they would need to have that base layer, all that data, we gave that to them. But if you don't have that, you can get that yourself too. You can go through Manta. You can go through your state agriculture websites. And so we'll talk a little bit about some things that you can do. So here is, let's see, I gotta make sure I'm sharing. Let me share with you what Manta looks like and how to use it. How many of you use Manta? If you wanna go ahead and put it in the chat box. Who uses Manta? Nobody use Manta? Anybody use Manta? Let me know if you use Manta. So all of our IDRC states are using data from Manta. So Ita mentions yes, they're using Manta. So Manta is a little bit weird about some things. One of my favorite things to do is to go ahead and say tobacco farms. Let's see if I can type farms, Kentucky, Manta. And then it will give me a whole bunch of information and we'll say, okay, Manta has 776 businesses that have, tobacco growers that it has mentioned right here. And so then I can go in and say, okay, well, let me take a look at James F. Hall. I got to close all their junk. And then it'll give me information about James F. Hall. It'll give me his address. It'll give me his phone number. But Manta also gets tax records, just what's considered public information. So this guy is categorized under tobacco growers. The records show it was established in 1998. It shows that his revenue, and it shows that he employs a staff of 2. So this may just be a mom and pop operation, or he may have workers that are contract that are not going to show up. But I can get some really good information. Now, Manta also, I can go to the bottom down here and I can take a look at, I can say, let me just look up Tennessee, or give me a state. Somebody give me a state. Who's first? What state? Okay. Arkansas, I believe. Arkansas, Manta, agriculture. So if I type that in, it'll say, all of a sudden, Manta's information will come up. And if I go to the bottom of the page, this is where it's helpful, there will be a whole bunch of subcategories. So it'll say, do you want animal aquaculture, Arkansas? Do you want animal fur? Do you want beef cattle except feedlots? Do you want the feedlots? Do you want berry crops? Do you want chicken and eggs, corn, cotton? And then I can actually go in there and copy this information if I'm super patient, which is what we did for all of our states. But you can go in and find those farms and look them up. So if I don't want to, I'm a specific county and I don't need the whole entire state, I can do the same kind of thing. Tennessee, Warren County, agriculture, Manta. Do that search, and then those things will come up just for that particular county. So going back toward the bottom, it'll still usually show that base. It'll give you subcategories if there's like cotton, and then there's cottonseed. And then I can also look maybe just for particular cotton in a particular area based on that. So that's the easiest way to use Manta, but I can go in there and look at that information, say this guy says he employs at least 4 people in this particular place in Arkansas, and it gives me some information about them. So I'm a huge fan of Manta. They are very good with their security. If you try to scrape their data or try to use their information, you're literally going to have to be copying and pasting. You can do that. It's not against the law or anything, but it can be a little bit of a tedious process. But if you want your farm data, this is a great place to start. Okay, so let me go back to the slides. So here's an example in the slides that we have. It's a really, really, really good site. So here's the slides. Let me see. So there we go. All right. So that's Manta. Said then a lot of you are worried, trying to figure out the new crops, like hemp is a completely new crop. So I would suggest that you definitely work with your Department of Agriculture and reach out to them, check out their websites. And there's a lot of information that you can just get from going to your state's Department of Agriculture and learning, and hopefully partnering with them if you can, and then learning the rules of the different things that you have in your state. Another one of my favorite ones is the use of the labor contractors. I don't know if you guys, most of you are probably familiar with this. If you're not, I'll put this link in the chat box. This is the list it's the site where the list is let me just see. If you go right here, this is the Department of Labor has those that are registered farm labor contractors. They're supposed to register with the Department of Labor. And so they keep a Excel sheet you can download for the entire country and then just filter out what is just for your state. So these are the guys or ladies that are contracting with workers to come into your state to work for particular farms. And so I always used it to directly reach out to them, find out when they're where they're working, when they're working, if there's any way that we can partner with them. But they update this. Last time it was updated was March. And I believe they used to have it's probably on a different page, those that are no longer certified so they've done some sort of violation. Some of them may still be doing it, but this is where you can get that information. So it's kind of a cool, it's definitely something that you want to know is available and use that as you can. So that's then there is what's called Freedom of Information Act. So right now we're kind of talking about all the different sources that you can get to make sure that you're really data rich, and then we'll talk about how to use it. But Freedom of Information Act, and so a lot of times your states, if you'll Google and say, okay, I need to do a FOIA, they call it a FOIA request, or you can Google like FOIA requests Tennessee and State Department of Education or State Department of Agriculture, and they'll have this place that you can request it. So when we were doing the list for the states that we were working with for IDRC, I wanted to get the hemp information for Oregon. And here's actually the email that I sent an email to them and said, hey, we're trying to get the grower contracts of all of your, hemp growers. And she answered me back and said, hey, here they all are. But I couldn't get that information unless I requested it through. Now, I've had it where they'll say, hey, I'll give you the names, but I can't give you the addresses. Well, if I get the name, I can go to Manta and go find it. So this is a way that, I would really encourage that if you can't find a dairy list or you can't find a hemp list, figure out who in your state you can ask. They'll do those Freedom of Information requests, make the request, and then a lot of times they'll respond pretty quick and get you that information. There are also some really good places to just follow along. Hemp is something a lot of states are trying to keep up with. I really like this particular site. It's called Hemp Industry Daily, and you can go and look at every single state and find out exactly what's happening in your state or by region. So you can go in here and say, okay, I want to, my little Zoom box is in the way. I want to go in here and look at, let's look at Texas. And then it'll give exactly what is happening in Texas. And, like Texas company acquires Kentucky-based processors. So you can kind of take a look and just see what's particularly happening. Right now, all 50 states, Idaho was the last one to agree to it. All 50 states are allowing hemp to be grown in their states in different ways. And if anyone wants any more information on our webinar page, we've done a couple in-depth things about hemp, a couple of webinars on that. We'll probably do an updated one here pretty soon. So this is an example of following along with what's happening with some of these different agencies and how that can be helpful. Let me close a few things and then I'll go back to the slides. Okay, so that is something I think can be very helpful. So here's an example of that. Let's see. All right, I'm still trying to go to the, let me get this out here. Too many things open. Let's give you a brain break for a second. Just a bad excuse for me messing up with my slides. Okay, so another thing to think about is, are you using your previous data? Take a look at your numbers and counties from the year before, see if your numbers are higher and lower. And then in your mind, do you know the reason why? Is it just because now people are saying, well, it's the pandemic? If it's the pandemic, what is it about the pandemic? Is it the fact that we haven't been able to get out in the field, and so we haven't been able to reach with the farmers? Or is it the fact that you've reached out to the farmers and they're saying, look, the supply places that we normally sold this to are not, it's not the same. Our supply chain's all messed up. So we're going to be, not having the same thing. Sometimes in migrant will just say, I don't know. I'm not sure why this happened. So you want to make sure that you can back up why those things are, why what's happening, the reason for that. So we mentioned a little bit earlier about using the past housing addresses, revisiting those, but just kind of, are you using your previous data? And then are you using your previous data and taking a look at your current data? We were kind of surprised when we worked with our IDRC states of how many states that we had that really didn't have recruiters keep any sort of logs on what they're doing. Maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, but there's so much data that can be gathered and can help really help you do good work, and knowing that, okay, this county, this is what we found, and visit this farm, this is what needs to take this one off the list, this is a high priority, this is what we should be doing in March, April, etc. It says making sure that you keep detailed notes, recruiters, that those are available if your supervisors don't need it, just for your own management of your areas, that you have that you're continually keeping the town, the city, the county, the region, and the state focused by looking at the small details and the big picture at the same time. So working in one area may also have there may be another area that's similar to that. The numbers could be similar. You may see, movement from one town to another, but are we looking at all of those small details and big details at the same time? So let's say that, let me look at my time. Let's say that you get all this data and right now you're saying, okay, great. You're showing us mantas, you're showing us this, but what on earth am I supposed to do with, how do I organize this? How do I get that? So how can you best use the data that you have? We understand that it can be overwhelming. Here are some thoughts that we have, suggestions of how to organize that data and just your staff and how to use it and maximize those efforts. So we suggest that, first of all, you're looking at your staff. Who do you have? And do they have the flexibility or the setup to cover as much territory as possible in the most organized fashion? So many times people say, well, all of our recruiters are district-based, and this is in a non-project area, and we won't be able to make changes until next year. You need to make sure that you can cover your state in an effective way and that your setup allows you to be flexible and find families and have the movement that you need to. You're also, hopefully, if you're on the state level, you're looking at how you can cover that whole state. So maybe you need 25, district level ones and 4 regional ones that'll cover it. Or maybe you don't have any of that kind of money and you need 3 very flexible recruiters that can cover very large areas. But what do you have, and is it set up in the most flexible way to ensure that you can get where you need to? Then do you have priorities on which areas should really have priorities? So of course, none of us have enough funding for what we need. How do you organize? So you've got to take some time to really determine what your priorities are. Are you wanting to grow your current programs larger? You feel like there's more people out there. You feel like you need another person out in the field because you just know that they're missing because you have this extra data to show, hey, we haven't even visited all these farms. Are you wanting to ensure you cover your areas, but you're not really sure which areas? So sometimes you can make the mistake of putting a recruiter in an area that doesn't have a lot of agriculture going on at all. And they may be spinning their wheels and they're not finding anybody. Are you wanting to find the most migrant students possible? That should be our goal, but sometimes that's not always the case. And so what is it that hopefully you're trying to do that? Are you determined to ensure that you know that your whole state, in order to better develop programming, like are you at the point right now where you don't know half your state and you just need to put some time in to do the work to see, hey, we've got to canvas all of this and then determine our priorities once we know it? Are you organizing sweep type activities? One of my absolute pet peeves is when people say, hey, we want you to come in to our area and recruit. And you say, okay, do you know where? Well, no, just do your thing. That should not happen. It should be, hey, these are the farms, these are the places that we need to have visited. We've not been able to do it. This is what should happen. But so often we're not sure. We know you guys are good at recruiting. Just go ahead. We need to foundationally be way better at our jobs and understanding where our families come and go. Organization needs to be closely tied to your goals. So we did mention, the maps that we have. It doesn't have to, one of the tools that IDRC is using is called Batch Geo. We did a training right before this one that'll be recorded if anyone wants information on that. We recommend that you have some sort of visual tool to take all of those lists and put it visually so you can see where your farms are. And so it says, when you can see everything visually, establish some protocols of how you will have staff methodically visit locations and report back on their findings as they make contact with these points. So you bring a couple recruiters in to help you. You've got places you want them to go. They report back and let you know exactly what they did, but they are doing it for long-term kind of things. They're not just like, oh, hey guys, like, this can be a complete downfall for a program. So you bring in 2 or 3 recruiters, they're trying to find as many people as they possibly can, and you have no record who they talk to. You have no idea how they explain the program. They could have come in and said, hey, my name is Jessica. I'm here helping, let's just say the state of Texas right now. We're trying to set up, make sure we visit all these different places. I may not be here in 2 weeks. So if the guy says you can't come right now, could I send another recruiter later on? When would be a good time? And then those people are setting up for your future people to come in. Not just say, hey, we found 35 and we're out the door, but they're building it. They're helping you know what's happening there. So you've got this visual map. You've got people methodically going to those different places. They're reporting back. They get rid of the stuff that doesn't need to be visited. They make the stuff that's higher priority. You start gathering that. So lists should be adjusted based on those visits, those contacts, ensure the state's getting very specific agribusiness profile information for all of those locations. And so I can't stand it when people say, oh, we're going to go do a sweep and you have no plan. because I can wander around and not find anybody if I'm not doing it right. And that sometimes can really happen. But if you tell me, hey, or sometimes you have someone gather that data for you, these are the 50 farms that I need you to visit. I need to know who it is, but keep in mind that this is a long-term project. So you're just trying to build that contact with them. Be the first person to start this, not just visit one time and maybe I go in somewhere that I'm not allowed and then nobody can come in later. But I get the information. And when I leave, I should be able to give you a good report that says, hey, this is what's happening in this county. This is where the recruiter should focus on next. And this should be some priorities. So that should really be happening all over. And recruiters can do that. So this idea of organizing your staff, successful recruitment involves thorough canvassing of each community. Data, the data that we've mentioned in all these different places, gives you the hints and the locations and the places and focus that you can have. But data will not always have everything. And that's another thing. Your recruiters should be trained to be methodical, to be thorough, really good at asking questions, taking notes, and stopping and finding places and leads along the way. We had a gentleman that worked with us for a long time, but was super, super good at just getting in anywhere. And so the downside was he absolutely abhorred, he was about 74 when he started with us. And I had the pleasure of working with him for many years, and he hated, I made everybody do reports and he'd say, yes, God, no, kiddo, I don't want to do this. So what we did, my concern was not that he wasn't working or that he was not going where he was supposed to. He just absolutely despised filling out the reports, but he was a really good recruiter. So I always had somebody go with him, once a quarter, every so often, to take notes of all of his contacts so that we wouldn't lose that. And so he actually wound up passing away. And when he did, we still had families reach out for years when they came back in trying to get a hold of him. But we were so grateful that we had picked his brain and had all this information. So whatever, it may not always work perfect that you say, oh, everyone's going to fill this report out. It may not always work that way. You want to make sure that you have a way to capture that data. Data shouldn't be just used once and put it aside. It should really be that foundation that you come back to. So be deliberate. Review the types of farms and agribusinesses. You've got these lists, you've got information that started. Ensure that you have the materials and resources to get to these places. So that's one of the challenges. You get all these lists, you send your recruiters out, but if they have nothing in their hands, or they're, that the farm sees as beneficial, or that the migrant family see as beneficial, then it might be in vain. So make sure that you have those things that you need. Make sure that you're visiting at the ideal times of the day and also the times of the year that you may not know that first time, but you do keep that data so that that won't happen the next time. If anyone has questions and comments, I'm talking a bunch, so please feel free to put those in the box. Be deliberate, market to them. So maybe your strategy is, instead of just showing up at all these farms, I'm going to send a newsletter of some of these projects that we've done. Like maybe we have a student leadership, maybe you have an essay contest of what it means to be a migrant student, and you share some excerpts of that. And then you send out this to the farms to say, hey, we're going to be visiting our local farms in our area. We're really excited to make sure we're not missing any more of our families. So a recruiter may call you or visit you in the next little bit. So you take some time to create some materials that highlight what you do, shows value of what you do. You mail it to the farmer first. The farmer opens it up and says, what in the heck is this? They take a look at it, but then a week later, they get a call from a recruiter and they say, well, we mailed out some information of some things that we're doing in the community. Not sure if you have time. You've put in a little bit of information that's hopefully might buffer them from thinking you're working with immigration or your Department of Labor, any of those kind of things. You do a little bit of marketing, whatever that is, to the group that you're trying to reach. Ensure that you have a plan in place for those newly found MEP students. This happens also, you get recruiters who work really hard, and then the program says, well, you found this new pocket of kids, but we can't do anything until next year because that's how our funding is set up. Do you have anything in place to serve kids even in non-project areas? Does any of that stuff, is that possible? Then you ensure that you have a program that really does make a difference for students, that just doesn't just hand out something in the beginning. You want, and that's it. You want to make all of this kind of combines to making sure that you're, it says that you've got everything that you need, but then you're also looking long-term on how to really build that. So a few other thoughts. Never forget the value of a partner. So if there's another agency that can do something that you're trying to do, and those funds can be used in a better way, and that agency can be partnered with, and you guys can work together. Do you have any other organizations trying to do similar work like your recruiters are doing that you can partner with? Can you work with them? Can you partner your recruiters with any other programs to help lessen the burden? Are there places recruiters that are going where maybe they should have more than one for safety or for time? And is there any work that supervisors can do to set up recruitment visits so recruiters can spend more time in the field? So maybe not recruitment visits, but maybe recruitment data that you're giving them the information. Hey, I want you to go to these kind of places. That whole burden of recruiting is not just specifically on them. They've got partners. Maybe they want the maps, but they don't feel very comfortable with that. So someone in your office is really good with that. Everyone sends their updates on a spreadsheet to that person, and then they put that all into one spreadsheet and put it up in the map. So maybe that was something we had to do in Tennessee because we wanted our maps updated, but our recruiters we really needed them out in the field. So they just had a shared spreadsheet that they would say, take this farm up. This is what happened when I visited this. And our data person would keep those maps updated. And so she'd get it in, she'd pop it up there and always knew the most updated version. So this idea of being deliberate, taking a look at these, how can you use the data that's found in the visits to inform future efforts? How can you be methodical and ensure that you clearly cover places? How can you ensure that keeping the data doesn't become too much of a burden for recruiters? We do have a tool that we're trying to pilot through IDRC that's available to all of our states, but it's also states can purchase if they want to try it out too. It's not through us. It's a company that makes this app that's an easy reporting tool. You don't have to use that. It's called Connect Team. But if you do want to learn more about that, we will have a presentation about that. But what are you doing? It doesn't have to be that, but are you looking at what you're asking them and making sure that it's possible? So it says, as you start visiting and contacting places, you'll find these new leads. Changes absolutely happen year to year. States really need to be able to adapt quickly. Thorough data analysis should be ongoing. And state IDNR staff can really get good at looking at those numbers of farms, acreage, actual places to focus on, and really project what they might see in a county compared to another. And recruiters can be taught how to really use that data effectively, and that data should be available to all. So I've bombarded you probably with a million ideas. Some of them I'm sure you're already doing. But comments, and I think I'm getting right towards the end. Comments, thoughts, questions on what we've mentioned, anything that's been mentioned so far, any way that someone's using data that was not mentioned. I'll just kind of check the chat box, see if anybody has any comments.